Michelle, thanks for joining us. Why don't you give us a
Hi,
quick
Jeff.
intro?
So my name's Michelle Greer, and I have a long history of working, doing product marketing at developer tools companies like Apollo and Heroku and HashiCorp. Uh, it's been a journey.
I was so excited when you told me you could do this session because I thought that your voice would be so valuable here for the viewers of the channel. You and I have had a lot of great conversations about software and its role in the world and how best to talk about it. So we'll jump right in
Do it.
because yeah, something you said to me a while ago, must have been like 3 years ago or something, lives in my head rent free. I think about it all the time. You talked about, developer education, other kind of valuable content like that, as sort of you used the analogy of a butterfly garden. Can you talk about that concept a bit? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So there was a really great blogger, community builder named Kathy Sierra many years ago, and she talked that you could outspend or outteach, right? And so much like, so I think so much of marketing to developers is they want to learn a new craft. They want to get better at something. And so, there's this idea that with open source software, I'm just going to put it out there, right? I'm going to put it out on GitHub and somebody's going to download it and use it. And that's going to be my marketing for my commercial solution, right? Because it's free. Like, why do I have to spend any money? And the reality of that is, if that's your strategy, the tendency is developers will just go and they download it, they use it in their project, and they say, great, thank you, right? And that's it. And, that's not marketing, right? That's awareness. That's the very top of the funnel, but that doesn't get them into where you want where it's like an integral part of their day to day. So something we talked about at Apollo is you build a butterfly garden, right? Like rather than the beautiful developer butterflies going to the flowers and getting the pollen and leaving, like you want to build things that attract them long term, right? So, what do I mean by that? I mean tutorials. I mean blog posts. I mean videos like this one, right? Things that educate developers on how to get to a better level with your tool. And a lot of that also isn't just content. A lot of that is conversation, right? As Dan Berner works at Apollo, big fan, and he has a community of people who talk about how to use GraphQL at scale, right? And he's got some very big names in that community. And so being able to, it's not just enough to get the tool out there and just say, like, hey, this is free, go, right? You want to make sure that developers can build with confidence and that that it's not just a tool that they use, that they're actually part of a community. And I think that's when your tool actually is seen as like sticky and relevant. And that's always what people are aiming for.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, as you were saying that, a thought popped in my head, which is always dangerous. But um, the today, right? You mentioned, okay, I made some software here, use it. Um, Today it feels like the bar is lower in some ways, or at least the barriers to entry is lower, right? I think anybody can. We
That's a
see
good
this in
way
the
of
open
putting it.
source world. Yeah, like we see it in the open source world a lot, right? Where a lot of folks can maybe create some useful looking software, something that replicates something out there that's existing. But the real I think where that comes back into the butterfly garden analogy is, and you used Dan's example, I think, of this community of practitioners talking about how they're using a technology at scale, GraphQL being the example, but you could substitute any a piece of tech for that. It's really the community around it that you can't just vibe code, your way into because it's a garden of one, and that's not a super sustainable way to do it. So, I do wonder if today, once you strip away the codes and the code and the bytes and everything like that, what's left? And it's really the folks that we're working with and your other practitioners in the field.
Well, and that goes to like basic psychology. Like in marketing, we're always trying to figure out, well, what's the best channel that gets me the best ROI. And the things that people, not just developers, trust is their peers. That's the number one most persuasive way to get a customer is somebody saying, I use Apollo and it's great, right? So I think the thing that a lot of developer tools companies and a lot of open source projects get wrong is you can sit there and ruminate on like, what is it that we're going to tell the community? What do we want them to say, right? But the reality is, I almost feel like the more successful companies I've been part of thought less about that and they thought more of like, how do I make you awesome every day, right? And if you focus on making users awesome, don't just make a better tool, make a better user of that tool, then those people start talking, right? And then people start trusting you more. And so that's why that community is so important. But the hard part about the community is sometimes they get really angry. And so it can backfire at you because you've built this community, you made them happy. And then if you pull the rug from them, then it almost backfires, right? And so it's really about making the butter. I mean, I'm sure a lot of developers are like, I'm not a butterfly, I'm a whatever, but like, making sure that there's enough for them to do and that they're happy and productive, and less about like directly thinking that you're going to tell them what to think about your tool.
Yeah, well, no matter the species, right? I'm sure nobody would argue with making users awesome. I think that's a very clarifying and incisive thought there. So thanks for sharing that. More people should have that, you know, hung up right behind their laptop when they're at work.
Every
Um,
day. I actually had, and it was Kathy Sierra. She had a graphic, and it was two men, and one had a beer, and he was like, "Here's how we're awesome," and the other guy had a glass of milk, and he's like, Here's how you become awesome." Right? And a
there
lot
you
of
go.
times when I would write, whether it was for, Terraform or Apollo, um, I have this thing called the humility ratio, which is take what you write, eliminate we and I out of it as much as you humanly can, and frame it in the reference of what they can do with it. And that is the same. It's not just for blog posts and for copy, but it's also for your documentation and your tutorials, right? Like nobody looks at Apple and Toyota and says, like, look at those great companies. They feel and they use those tools, they use their products and they're happy with them, right? Like, and the company's just this like, you know, abstract thing behind it. Ultimately everybody just wants to know what's in it for me.
No doubt. Developers have many love-hate relationships. Meetings is something I put in that category. Recruiters, maybe another, and marketing is a big one. But I feel like there's an art to doing marketing in a way that feels kind of right to a developer. And I'm curious, in your experience, what works, what doesn't?
What work? Well, it changes. It definitely changes now. It's right now, it's very hard to get above the noise,
Hmm.
right? I think it's incredibly hard because there are so many tools, as you mentioned, and things change so quickly, right? Like now the kids are all talking harness engineering, but that was a month ago, so who knows what's next. So I think what works is step one has got to be listening, right? And being part of the community. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see is it's really easy to ruminate and think that you're going to come out with this is the ultimate message or the ultimate product in a board meeting or in any meeting for that matter. And in product marketing, we have a saying which is nothing interesting happens in the office. It literally it's the it's written out and it's the expression is Nihito. Nothing interesting happens in the office. Go out, listen, be a part of the community, right? And if you're picking up the themes of what people are struggling with, you can build better tools. And it's not intuitive for a lot of people who build developer tools, right? Like my friend once told me he worked at Twilio very early, and I was like, what is wrong with them? Why do they not listen? you know, why are they not listening to the community? He was like, Michelle, because when you were out with your friends, they were sitting behind a compiler. That's a very comfortable place for a lot of people who build tools to say, like, I'm just going to outcode this. And the reality is, no, you have to go out and speak with the community. You need to have candid conversations with them, right? And so much of my part of my job, I used to joke around when I give talks. I'm like, I listen to engineering leaders complain for money, right? I would sit there and listen to Zoom calls. I was on Dan's little circles all the time, just hearing the community. And once you pick up, they're struggling with this, they want to do this. Then when you do go to write something, it's spoken from a position of at the very least sympathy and ideally empathy, where you truly understand what their pain is, right? So I think that is such a key step. And I think it's so easy to get stuck in meetings and think like you're going to just slog it out that way. And it just doesn't work. So it's being part of the community and and even beyond that, just being part of an ecosystem, right? Like, what other tools do people use? How do my tools have to integrate? How do I address that? I think also something that's happening now is that has sped up so much with AI, right? And it used to
Yeah.
be that Google search engines, it took you about 5 or 6 months to really get noticed. And now it's like the AI summaries are like ridiculous. So now your content has to have some level of sympathy and empathy, or your tutorials. And then you have to write a lot, right? And so I think right now, I don't think anything has changed from the other, like before AI. Like, if you have good docs and you have good tutorials, you win, right? Like,
Mm.
because what's happening now is it's AEO, those are getting picked up by those AI summaries. And now the weird thing that is something, back in the day we never had to think about, is if you're vibe coding, you're using Claude or something. Now a lot of people are picking up tools from their LLM, from directly from their LLM, because they're like, I want to build this, I'm going to use X. So, content is more important than ever, but a lot of the same principles stay the same. Like, it's about, how do I make you successful for what it is that you're trying to do? I know that's like seems like common sense first principles stuff, but I think people overthink it with like, I'm going to do this growth hack. I'm like, that stuff just doesn't work. It's not authentic. I think also something that's important now too, and I am not this person, and I recognize this in my career, is it does help to have people who've been there and done that, right? Because
Mm.
people, and that's harder than ever, right? Because everything is brand new now. But at least if you have people in marketing who've kind of been in the shoes, um, they're a little bit more familiar with some of the edges that can hold you up when you're building something.
Totally. I wonder if like um what this how the structural forces in our industry are changing that. Like for example, you 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 brought up you can't, sitting behind a compiler, right? When you could be out there talking to your community and doing the sometimes uncomfortable work of talking to your community, listening to especially not just the highlight reels, but the bloopers too. You can get a lot farther now with one idea and go a lot farther down the prototyping slash MVP pipeline without having to talk to somebody, right? Like you can
Dangerous.
get to working software. Like, so I
Yeah.
wonder if should people be thinking about like certain milestones or stopping points? Especially I'm thinking like, okay, maybe a co-founder team or a very small startup trying to find product market fit, for example. Like what should they be thinking about, particularly when they're trying to find that MVP?
I think there's a lot of tools out there that are going to go the way of the dodo because they don't do this. Because
Hmm.
it is so easy to just build something. I mean, like, I'm I've mostly done product marketing in my life, and I've vibe coded stuff. It's not hard. I was terrified of some of the things it recommended to do, which is scary. But I think ultimately, if you want to find product market fit, the first thing you do is, it's good to start backwards from the problem. And I actually think you need to talk to people first, right?
Hmm.
Before you even pick up Claude, right? Because ultimately, even if you're using coding agents, it's still going to take time. So starting with, I think most engineers I talk to, when they really have a sense of like, this is my user, this is their pain, the direction of whatever they build is so much more useful. And that applies for a startup, but that also applies for enterprise software too, right? So I think starting off with first principles, working backwards, none of that really changes. I think some of the tooling around usage. So like, build something, get the crucible of usage. I think as you build out, you start off with speaking to people, right? Start with things that don't scale, right? And as those users grow and grow and grow, then you turn to something like Post Hog and you're like, okay, how are people actually using these things, right? And I think as you see the data, if you see drop offs or you see things that don't work, that's when you go back and you start talking to people, right? So I
Mm.
think the trap that people get in now is it's so easy to move fast. And what I'm seeing now, and I've been consulting for a bit, I see a lot of tools and they're like, we have to keep up with our competition, right? And so they just build and build and build. And you look at it and I'm like, do you understand how incomprehensible what you've built is? It would be like if you could suddenly build a house way faster and then you get the Winchester house where there's like wings and stairwells to nowhere. And you're like, stop doing this,
Some
right?
MC Escher stuff.
Yes. So, I think it's really easy to get in the trap because it's so easy to build, but fundamentally, distribution is now the hard part, right? And I don't think that is sunk into people's brains as much as it needs to.
Distribution is now the hard part. I'm going to remember that. That's another thing I'm going to put right in front of my monitor.
Hey, if I can code things and share them, what did I use? I didn't use React. Sorry, I used Dart and Flutter because I was just like, I want to play with this. And I was like, this is
Oh,
too stupid easy.
you just made a lot of people in a very
Pissed off.
specific niche of the developer community. So no, so happy.
Oh
People
yeah.
who are bought into Flutter and Dart, they just love it. I've met a few folks who really want more, the team to do more tooling for the Flutter community, like when our open source GraphQL stuff to do that. And I want so badly to oblige them. It's just hard because it's a small community. You're not changing very many folks' lives there, but who knows? Maybe that is it. Like it is a wonderful tool set. I will give it that.
If I were to do anything seriously, I basically wanted an app where I could share videos safely with my daughter and share pictures of her without giving her face to the board. And if
There
I
you
ever
go.
did take it seriously enough, I would probably just redo it in React because it's easier to find people who know it.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Sorry, dark people.
Well, that brings me to my next question. How'd you get into the sign of work?
Um, I got into software because I am from Austin and it is just what people do. Uh, I was in sales and I found that marketing was just sales written down, and that was appealing because I was like, well, that just scales better. I'll just put stuff on the website and then I don't have to explain it every single time. And then I got into developer tools because my friend uh, wanted somebody to blog and take pictures at his developer events. And I found that I liked figuring out what made things work. Like it wasn't just enough. I was like, okay, let me walk you through this feature XYZ because I was actually in e-commerce at first. I wanted to know, well, why is this written in .NET? And why would you want to write something in Ruby? And what is this database doing? And why would you use MySQL over Postgres? So I think part of me is just inherently curious about how things work, but I never got to the point where I was like, I want to do this all the time. Like my problem is I can't decide what stack I would work with because I haven't found one that I'm like, oh my God, I must do this day in and day out.
The one true way, right? I hear you. I think all of us are in search of that, and it comes up with a different answer, don't they?
My favorite is the people who work with like Rust or Go, and especially Go. Like I have friends who are just like they work in Go and they're like they use it in anger like all the time. And it's like those are the funniest communities where it's like they use it, they know it's the right tool, but there's just certain things about it that they're just like, this makes me want to like put my desk like tip my desk over because and so it's like I have a friend and like literally like half his tweets were like stupid stuff about Go.
What's the saying? There's software that people like complain about, and there's software that nobody uses, or something like that.
Yes. No, like people are sometimes people are like, look how many GitHub issues they have. I'm like, if you don't have any GitHub issues, that's a bigger issue. I think there's like a happy medium. Like you don't want to do what I call like GitHub issue bankruptcy, where you're like, I'm just gonna delete them all. I've seen
Oh
that.
yeah. But yeah, don't do that, please. To all the open source maintainers on the call, there's a better way. Remember, this is developers' love language, is using free software and being unhappy with it. It's just the way that it's our happy place, right?
It's such a well, and it's such a crazy time for open source because not all of your users are people, right? So you have to think of
Hmm.
that. But then, if you're getting what I've been reading a lot about is just like how many submissions you're getting, like um, contributions that are just crap and you just can't even sort through them.
Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights into marketing, what developers care about, how to make users awesome. I learned a lot. I hope the audience does too. So really appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite, Jeff. I always appreciate being on calls with you. I don't know if y'all knew that, but Jeff was a teacher. And I always felt when you're on calls, like you kind of get people to attention. So I hopefully that applies to this as well. But yeah, miss everyone to follow, miss you too. So have a good one.
You too.